Okay, so today I'm going to be building a deck over this concrete patio, and it's actually going to be a bit of a fun project. I'm going to take you through the entire thing, show you everything I do to build it. The reason it's going to be a bit exciting though is I'm actually doing this at my sister's house. She's away for the weekend, and the goal is to quickly build this entire deck and have it done to surprise her when she comes back. So our deck that we're building is going to be 3 by 5 meters following the concrete here. We're going to have the boards running this way parallel with the house, and I also want to frame and install a picture frame border around the deck. Now the biggest issue we're going to have with this build is the height. So we want the decking boards to finish flush with the render, so it's a gradual seamless finish like that. Obviously to do that, we're going to have our joist 20 mil lower than that. The boards are 20 mil thick. You can see we don't have much room underneath these joists to really connect them to the concrete. Now that shouldn't really be an issue for our first bearer here. The way I'm actually going to build this is we're going to have a few bearers and joists running in between them. We'll get to that later though. But for our bearers sitting in the middle of the concrete, I'm going to be using these small foots. This is from Eurotech. I've never used them before, but the way these are going to work is we bolt them onto the concrete like that, and I can twist this to change the height slightly. For now though, we're going to get started with this whaler. Alright, so I'm going to put two 10 mil packers on the top here. This is going to be the thickness of our decking board, so I want that to line up at the top of the render. And just to make it easy for myself, I'm going to pack underneath this. And I'm just going to get this in the right spot too. I want to be 65 mil back from the side of the window, which is right there. What I'm going to be doing is having another bit of 90-45 like that running through the outside, and then the 20 mil decking board screwed to the face of the deck, so that way the end of the deck's going to line up with the edge of the window here. So I've got the points good with the window there. That's where we want the deck to finish. That's the point I want to start from. And now for the rest of the deck, we want to make sure everything's level and matches up with that. All right, so the way I'm going to be building this deck is going to be unlike anything I've done before. And the main reason for that is firstly, the height we're restricted with. And the second reason is for cost. The way you normally build a deck is you'd have bearers like this running one way, and then you'd go through with your joists. They'd sit on top of the bearers and they'd fly through at the top. The bearers are to strengthen everything, hold everything up, because if all you did was joist, the amount of posts you'd need to support the joist to the ground would be way too many, and it would cost way too much. I've got the same problem if I wasn't going to have these timbers running this way, and instead all I did was having my joist running across here. I'm suddenly looking at buying a lot of these. These are about $10 each. I've only had to buy about 10 to do it the way that I want to do it. If I was going to buy these for all the joists running through that way, I think I've got about 15 or 16 joists in total. I'm at least going to need 2 per joist, so suddenly we're looking at around $300. So we'll set up and start doing this one in a second, but what I will be doing is having my joists butt into those, and we're going to be putting joist hangers on there to support them to make sure there's no sag and that they are held strong. So I do want to get a couple parallel measurements, and we'll see if this slab is parallel off the house. So on this side, I've got 3035. And for this side, we've got the same, so that's good, 3035. Now for the outside of the deck, I don't really want to have these right at the very edge. Even if I have them running this way, those 2 holes are going to be too close to the edge of the slab. And the slab might crack, it might break off. I just don't think it's a secure fix-in. So instead of having this last bearer at the very end, I'm going to pull it in 65 mil, which is 20 mil for our decking board. And I'm going to do another 45 mil block on the side of our bearer just to push it over a little bit. So what I might do then is if I go 65 and the other side of that is 110, that is going to be the line of my outside bearer. So then I'm going to flick that line, and that's going to be where these footings go. So I'm going to mark where that goes. And I'm just going to get a measurement of the house, which is 2925. That's right there. And then half of that is 1462, and I'll also mark that because that'll be our line for our bearer running through the middle. Sweet. Alright, so we're ready to start screwing down our base plates. One thing I need to think about though, before I go through and screw them down, is to actually set up what these heights are going to be. If I just went through now and screwed them all down and decided to turn them later for the heights, we got this little tab on the side where I'm going to screw through into the bearer to lock it in place. And depending how far I want to go for the height is going to change where that little tab is. Obviously, I need all these tabs to be lining up in a straight line because our timber is going to be running in a straight line. So I'm going to have to get the first one at the right height and then play around with all of them, twist them around to they're the right height. And then depending where I twist them is going to show us where these holes are going to land on the ground for us to screw them down. This is actually going to work out quite easily because I've got those window packers there. I'm going to set the level on those window packers, put it on the cap over here, and I can check that for level. So I've twisted that until it's the right height. We can see that's pretty much level now. And now that I've got that good, I'm going to take the level off, turn that cap around. I'm actually just going to put it there. I don't want to screw down in the expansion joint of the concrete. And I want to line this tab up here with that chalk line that we flicked through before. Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to have one tab that way, the next little tab that way, and that's going to help lock our bearer in place. We don't want them to all be the same way because then that bearer could slightly twist back and forth. If we alternate which way they're facing, it's really going to lock it in and offer no movement in that bearer. Sweet. That is secure, that is locked in place. And for this next one, I can obviously level off the one we just put in. So I'm going to do that to start with. It needs to go down a fair bit. But what I also want to do is keep referring to other fixed points we have, such as these window packers. What could happen is I could keep going off one point to the next point to the next point, and if I get them slightly at a level between one and then do the same thing on the next one, the deck can start to slope away. So I keep going through and checking off multiple fixed points, we should be all right. In saying that though, we just did reach a new problem. So this concrete slab isn't built level. You can see we have a drain there. So that's obviously a higher point over here flowing down to the drain. So that one's one of the lower points. That's why that one worked so well. But as we start to move away from the drain, the concrete gets even higher. We've got to this point where this is wound down the entire way and it is still high. It is at a level. It is out by about 5 mil. So what we're going to do is just screw this one in place. And when I put my bearer down, I'm going to mark the bearer and do a checkout of 5 mil for it to sit down 5 mil lower on this single one. Here comes the rain. Alright, so they're all bolted down, and now I should be able to sit the bearer through the middle of them like that. So obviously we can see it's not completely level. I do need to do a few checkouts on this. What I'm going to do to make it easy for myself is actually use a laser. It's just going to be a lot quicker, but I'm going to set up the laser, work out the height from the green laser line to the plate here, and then work out the differences in the rest of them. And that difference is going to be how much I need to cut out of the timber. If you've only got a 2 meter level, you can do the same thing. It's going to take a little bit longer, a bit involved, but you could go through your level. I'll hold this up to whatever it needs to be, but I've got that level there. I can measure that, and that's actually about 8 mil I need to take out. I'm just going to set the laser up here. That is on, and level is going to be 143 to the bottom of the line. That's an 8 mil there. But having that laser makes that step a lot quicker and easier. Now I'm just going to sit this back on place, and I'm just going to go through and mark where the footing starts and finishes. So I can do my checkout from one side to the other. I'm not checking out any more of the timber than I don't need to, and then it's going to be completely level once we drop her in place. Alright, now we should be able to lift this on, and this should be perfectly level. That is perfect. And the next thing I'm going to check is make sure it is level across this way too. And that is exactly what we want to see. You can see we've got that little rock in it still. We're going to get rid of that as soon as we screw through into these brackets. And then obviously once we go through into our joist in between here too, it is also going to lock everything in place. Alright, so now we're ready to go through and just smash out the subfloor. I've got some timbers over there, and I'm just going to be cutting the joist in to go in between these bearers on this side and that side. While I'm putting them in, I want to make sure I get a measurement of the overall, and I want to center all my measurements for my joists so that they're even, because these joists are going to be where the screw lines are. I need to make sure they're even the whole way through, otherwise we'll get to the end, and if we have two joists close to each other, you're going to have two screw lines close to each other, and it doesn't look too good. So the overall deck is going to be 20 mil back from there, which is 5.365, I reckon. To the end of this timber though, we've got 5.315. We'll go 5.315 divide 12, and that gives us 4.43 spaces. So this bit's pretty straightforward. I'm just going to mark out where all the joists go. I'll mark across 4.43 in all three of these bearers, and then we're just going to measure and cut and put the joists in between. I actually almost made a bit of a mistake, and I picked it up on it just before it was too late. In this box, I've got joist hangers. We're going to be throwing joist hangers on every single one of these joists. And they sit under the joist, so I'm going to put little nails in the sides of them to hold them to the bearer, and that's just going to mean that over the course of time, if people walk in, jump in, whatever they're going to do in this deck, these aren't going to sag down. The issue is though, I might almost be right with some of these ones here. No, I won't even be. The issue is, once I've gone through and screwed it off, I can't get these on underneath. So I've only done a few screws for now. I'm just going to quickly unscrew them. And I'm just going to go through, place these where they need to go underneath the joist. Then we can screw them off and then go through and nail off these hangers. Alright, I think I've screwed up a bit by doing this, but I've decided to get clouts and hand nail these hangers off. By the time I hand nail all these hangers off and do that side too, that's going to be the day done, and I'm suddenly going to be struggling to get this deck done before my sister gets back. The reason I decided to hand nail them is normally I'd always say using a coil gun or a PPN is going to be a lot more efficient because you're going to be spending less time doing it, meaning you're not paying for labour and the job's actually going to be done for a bit cheaper. Coil gun, I could still do that for a cheap price here. I'm not really the biggest fan of the coil gun though. I either prefer the PPN, which is a gun that shoots nails directly in the hole, or if I have to, hand nailing them. For this job, I'm obviously doing the labour for free, so the only prices we're looking at is the cost of materials. Getting a box of these clouts is going to be a lot cheaper. I actually don't know what they cost. I'm guessing like 20 bucks at the most, compared to a box of PPN nails, which you're looking at over $100. So we saved $80 doing this. It probably just means I'm going to be sweating, working my ass off out here in the sun for about an hour, trying to hand nail all of these and getting them done today. It's 3:20 PM right now. I've got only tomorrow to try and get this deck done, and it doesn't help that we started this halfway through the day. Let's get to it though, we'll see what we can do. So all of those joist hangers are done, and it's a pretty good start on the subfloor. We still got a bit of work to do. We've got to finish off the ends, and especially because they're doing that picture frame I spoke about, there's a little bit more framing involved. We'll get into that tomorrow. Tomorrow's going to be a massive day. If I did start this day in the morning, I think we actually would have got a few boards down today. This went up pretty quick. I'm happy with the progress on it. Tomorrow I'm going to have to run out, get the decking boards as well for this job. Since it was so last minute and I'm trying to do it as a last minute surprise, nothing was organised, meaning that for all the timber, I'm going to have to run off, load it up in my car, get all the decking boards here tomorrow. So tomorrow's going to be a bit of a push. Even if we don't get it done tomorrow though, I'm just going to keep filming the entire project and show you guys this entire job start to finish. All right, so it's 6:30 Sunday morning. I'm up nice and early, and honestly, if I spent all day on the deck today, I think we'd get pretty close to getting it done and surprising my sister. Unfortunately though, I didn't have this planned out. The weekend wasn't free, and I decided this summer to try race some triathlons. So I've got a race this morning that I've got to go do, and the goal was to get the race done as quick as possible so we can finish that, get back to the deck and try and get it done. Alright, so the race is done. It's just past 11 now, so the goal is to go home, fuel up the body, get something to eat, and then I'm going to run to Bunnings, pick up all the decking board. And look, the deck's not going to get done today. The goal was just to lay a few boards down, so hopefully when my sister gets home, there's something there to surprise her. Alright, so we're not looking too good. It's 2:30 now. Don't have much longer left in the day, but we still got to go through, frame it for the picture frame, and coat this deck with bitumen paint. So the way we've framed this is for our decking boards to run this way, and we spoke about this earlier. I feel like that looks a bit too bland, a bit too boring. So instead of having our decking boards run all the way here and finishing in line with this joist, I'm going to have one decking board on the outside going the other way. This can be mitered with the other board on the external side, and we're just going to have a big square or big rectangle around the deck, and our other boards are going to be inside of that. Problem is, if we have one board going this way and all of our boards are going to butt into that and join into it, we don't have anything here to hold them. So I'm going to have to beef up the sand joist on both sides. I'm going to get a bit of 90-45. We'll put it on its edge like that. Our decking boards are 140. We're going to be overhanging them 20 mil for that face board. So that 140 is going to finish pretty close to the edge of this block. So I'm going to put that block in like that, and we're also going to put a few packers in place and hold it off by about 10 mil. And that means that our face board should finish around there, and then our other boards have something to be screwed into with this block here. The last thing I'm going to do before we do start laying the decking boards is just go through and cover the timber with this timber protector. With all the gaps in the decking board, water's still going to get through, and even though this is treated pine, this is made to be used outdoors, if we have water get through the decking boards and just sit on top of these joists, over time they could start to rot. Now putting this timber protector on is going to make this deck last another 5 to 10 years on top of what it would last already. If you're doing this, I definitely recommend getting a brush and using a brush for any areas close to render, close to windows, or close to a fence. If I'm using the roller, there's a really good chance that it could flick some of that bitumen paint onto the render up here. That's going to be exposed, that's going to be seen, and you're going to have a nightmare if you try to take this stuff off. I'm not too worried about hitting this side here. There's going to be a decking board up to that height where we worked off, so anything down there with bitumen paint on it is going to be covered. It's just if we go anything higher than that, that's what's going to be seen. Alright, I've had to make a tough call, and I'm calling it a day right now. So the subfloor is done, we've done the bitumen coat, and I've moved some of the decking boards to the back. I still need to get a few more. We've only got half the decking boards I need right now, but it is 4:30 PM right now, and if I want to start laying decking boards in, it means I'm going to get set up with a miter saw, start cutting stuff in, and I don't think it's worth trying to get a few boards down now at this time. Starting at 1 PM and 2 PM on both days was never going to be a good idea. So I think the surprise is off the table, but I'll be coming back here for one day next week, and we're still going to continue on with the deck, and I'll take you through everything we do to finish this deck off. Alright, so we did fail with that surprise. I didn't get anywhere close to finishing the deck off in time. Surprise is ruined. We didn't get the deck completed, but we're still going to go through and finish it off now though. So we will start going through. I'll screw down as many of these as possible, and then we're going to have to take a break, go to Bunnings, get some more decking boards to finish it off. First thing I want to do though is we might grab this one. This looks like the longest one here, and I actually want to start building this picture frame before I do anything else. Alright, so I do want to start with a full board against the house. By full board, I mean full width. With the size of this deck, it's going to be quite possible, when I did measure it, I think it is going to happen, that we will need to rip one of the decking boards to make the overall size work. I don't want to have the picture frame ripped, so we're going to have this a full thickness board, and there's a chance it might be a small board next to it once we get going with the actual regular boards in between. And for this one as well, there's two ways we can do this. There's probably only one way that's right though. The first way is we can just go through and push it hard to the rendered wall and screw it off that way. The issue doing this is that I'm looking at this right now, it doesn't look straight. 9 times out of 10, your rendered wall isn't going to be perfectly straight. So if I push it hard to there, what I'm going to have to do afterwards is start creeping all the gaps with all these other decking boards to try and make it all straight and parallel. I think the best way to do this first board is I'm going to flick a line through here and just pull it out and make this one straight, even if there are small gaps between the decking board and the house. I'm going to aim for roughly 5 mil of a gap the entire way through. So if it does come in and out a couple mil here and there, it's not going to look too bad. So the decking board is exactly 140. So I'll button to the render and I'm going to mark 145, and that gives us that 5 mil gap. Alright, so I'm going to jump in and start tacking this faceboard off straight away as we go. Alright, so I want to pull her over so we can see that chalk line going the whole way through. And then I'm just going to use a bit of an off-cut board here too. We want that to be sticking past, and for the long point of this faceboard to be sticking past the frame by 20 mil. And this is for our faceboard. Once this is done, our deck's going to be hanging over by 20 mil. We're going to have a board like this one here on the face of the deck, hiding the side of the subfloor. So for this one, we are going to go about here. And I'm just going to go and do the first screw in there. We're just going to leave it for one screw for now, and I'm just going to work my way down, go in every second joist for now, and we're just going to work on getting this board straight with our chalk line. Now the reason I'm only doing one screw per joist in every second one for now is that if we did 2 screws next to each other, it's going to be a lot harder to pull that decking board back in, and most of the boards I do have here do have slight bows and warps in them. So I could actually go through and screw this completely off now. I'm going to leave it for the second. I just want to make some more progress getting this picture frame done, and then we can go through and screw everything off. You know, this is my first time using the AEG miter saw. I love it because it's so small and easy to move around, but since we're using such wide 140mm decking boards, I think the bigger 3 or 5mm blade might be better, so I'm going to switch this over for today. So for the first board we did, I'm going to get my speed square. That's a 45-degree angle. I'm going to use that there to mark the line, and then that way that screw is going to be lining up on the same 45-degree, following that same cut line through there. And to get the same places on this board here, I'm just going to get my speed square, flip it around the other way. I'm going to go back in a 45 degrees this way, and then I can mark out exactly where that line goes, and screw this one in right here. Screw that one in. And we'll do the same thing over here. Mark where that one goes up there. Now for this outside board, I don't need to worry about doing a flick line the whole way through. I did screw up the subfloor when I was making it, so all I'm going to do now is get my ruler. I'm going to measure that 20mm overhang coming out this way, and wherever I go through to screw it, I'm going to make sure we get that same overhang from the edge of the subfloor, and I can just screw it off there, and I know it's going to be straight. Done 2 screws so far. I still just want to double check my work though, so I'm just going to 3, 4, 5 this and triple check that it is square. So we're pretty good there. And yeah, we're right on 23. Works out pretty well, I'm happy with that. I do just want to quickly double check that this one is straight. And yeah, she's looking great, that's good. Move on to the next one. Now for our outside faceboard, I'm not going to follow the joist in these ones. I definitely want to double check measurement and flick a line from that first faceboard we did. If this one was out slightly, you could potentially see it because we're going to have all the gaps between our decking boards. And if it's out, it means we're going to change the gaps to be a bit bigger on one side. Truthfully, for a deck this size, 3 meters, we could probably get away with it. If it was out by 10 mil, if you add a mil per every single gap between the boards, you can easily cover that span and you won't notice it. Regardless, we want to make it right though. So I'm going to get a measurement from this side, copy that measurement to the other side, flick a line, and that's going to be where this outside faceboard gets screwed to. Alright, so I'm just going through and we're just going to continue the faceboards all the way to the end. Obviously this side we've got to play around a little bit. I'm just going to do a rough checkout around all these pipes here. There'll be a cover covering those, so I can be a little bit rough with those. We do have a PVC downpipe here though. That isn't going to be covered anymore, so I want to try to do as neat as I can, do a nice checkout around that. I don't have any hole saws with me at that size, so we're just going to have to try to do it by hand with the jigsaw and see how it turns out. Alright, so for doing a checkout around the pipe, the first thing I'd want to do is get a hole saw bit, drill the holes for the decking board. I don't have a hole saw bit with me at this size, so the second thing I'd try to do is find an offcut of the same PVC pipe. You just place it on your decking board and trace it, but I don't have that either. So what we're going to have to do is try to scribe and work out the size of this pipe. I'm going to do this on an offcut piece of decking board, hopefully get it perfect, and then I can copy this over to the main piece, trace this little practice piece, and then that way I know I'm not screwing up a full length of a decking board. So I hope this idea works all right, but I'm just going to drive a nail into the center of the board. It's about 100 mil, we're going to make it 110. I want a 5 mil gap all the way around the pipe, that same 5 mil gap that we're going to have everywhere. So half of 110 is 55. My goal is if I just hook my tape on like that there, I'm just going to try freehand follow 55 on my tape as it spins around in a circle. Alright, so we do have a circle there. It's not completely neat. What I'm going to do is cut this board directly in half and just follow the line and try smooth it out while I cut it and try perfect that circle. Alright, that's a rough draft. Let's try it out. Alright, so I don't know how that's happened. It's actually worked out pretty great if we wanted it to be tight. We do want that 5 mil gap the entire way around. And you can see, yeah, we need to go just a few mil wider as well. So I'm actually pretty happy with this template. We're going to use this, and what I'll do is I'll trace it onto the proper board, and we'll just go through and just make that line about 5 mil wider. I'm going to take it. It's not perfect, but it does work out all right. I know some people love having their decking boards go hard up to the pipe, and I do think that looks better, but you just always want gaps around anything like this for movement over time. You don't want to have your decking boards hard up to the pipe and for them to have to move around and influence or even crack or weaken the pipe over time. I'm happy with that. We'll screw this one off, do the same over here too. In case you're looking at this too, we do want to get a couple more trimming pieces in here to help support the edge of these corner boards too. I used every small offcut I had the other day to try and make something work, but we were short. So when I do go to get more decking boards, we'll get some more pieces of timber and we'll make this a bit more solid before we screw off all the other boards in here. Alright, so we've got 3 sides of the picture frame done now. I've extended both of those sides all the way to the end. Still need to go through and screw them off, but we will do that later. I'm going to leave that end one out. The reason for that is we're going to start filling in the deck now, and it's going to be a neater finish if I run all the boards longer, where that picture frame's board's going to go, And then I get a track saw to do a really nice clean cut at the end there. For now though, I want to start working out the spacings of our boards in between here. So we have in between the picture frame 2756. And that should actually be exactly the same the whole way through now. 2756, yeah, that's good. All right, so what I want to do is find out how many boards are going to fit in this spacing. And I also want to work out what the spacing between the boards are going to be. I normally aim between 4 to 5 mil, but if we can make it slightly bigger or slightly smaller and make full boards work the entire way, we'll definitely do that. So to start with, I'm going to be doing 2756 divided by a 140 for the board plus a 5 mil gap. So we'll divide it by 145. And that gives us 19.00, which is pretty damn close to full boards. One thing we actually do want to do is if I get that 145, we times that by 19, that gives us 2755, which is almost exactly what we have here. I also want to add another 5 mil because we're accounting for a board and a gap. Obviously on the other side though, once we do our boards and our gaps, we're going to have one more 5 mil gap towards the outside of the overall measurement. That gives us 2760. So that means I'm probably going to be doing roughly 4.8 mil gaps. And that means we're not going to have any rips at all in this deck, and it's going to be full boards the entire way through. All right, so now that we have our spacings, we can start working out our bays. The way you should always do a deck is by doing your boards in individual bays. You shouldn't go through cutting every single board and then try to go through 5 mil spaces the entire way through, because they can kind of gradually grow or shrink by a mil here and there. You don't want to get to that last board and have it running out. So we are going to be using those 145 spaces, meaning we have 5 mil gaps between our decking boards. On that last bay, we might need to play around with it slightly to make it work. But what I'm going to do is mark a line and flick a line for every 5th or so board. We're going to flick those lines perfectly straight, screw those boards down completely off, and then we'll go through and fill in small sections of only 4 boards at a time. So 145 times 4, that's going to get us 580. I'm just going to mark that there. I'm just going to flick this line. So now what I'm going to do is cut decking boards following this chalk line the whole way through. We'll get that one nice and straight, and then I'll measure off that one for our next board over here. We'll flick that line, do the same thing, and we'll do all of those all the way through our deck until we've got our bays ready to go. $440. So that should go there. And we do want 5 mil gaps everywhere, so I'm going to put a packer in there, and that's going to hold it exactly where it needs to be. Actually, I almost made a mistake with that one. I'm going to have to reflick this line. So what I did was 145 times 5, but I forgot to add another 5 mil for this first little gap we have in here. So 145 times 4, that's what we did here. That gives us 580, and I want to plus another 5 mil, which gives us 585. And that means our first board also has that 5 mil gap, and by the time we get to our last board here, there'll be a 5 mil gap before we have our bay board. All right, so I'm glad I picked up on that. What I'm going to do is get another 5 mil packer, and I'm just going to pack it across to that chalk line we flicked. That just saves us running through and flicking another chalky. All right, we got there, the bay boards are in. That M1 was a nightmare. It was completely bowed. A lot of these decking boards are actually gonna be pretty hard to deal with. I got them from Bunnings. I think I spoke about how I got screwed over a little bit trying to get the materials here. And these are the last that were on the shelf. So it's gonna be a bit annoying for me to straighten them. So we are pretty much ready to start cutting in the majority of the deck now and cutting in these bays. Before I do that, I do want to finish screwing these off. We've only tacked one screw here and there, same as these first boards here. And the reason I did that is I want to go through and flick a straight line. I do want to add as well, if you are building a deck, the reason I'm going through flicking these lines down and screwing everything off now before I put the baseboards in, because if we did put the baseboards in, it means I could just flick the line of everything and screw everything off at one go. The reason we're doing this now is I want these boards to be screwed off and extra strong. Once we put our baseboards in here, we'll get to the process soon, but I will be putting wedges in between the boards, hitting them pretty tight to make sure the gaps are even, and that could actually force these boards out if they're not completely screwed off. So that's why I want to go through, make sure I screw these off completely before we start filling in the bays. All right, so I'm going to go get the rest of the decking boards and we're just going to start cutting in and laying out the entire deck. The process now is I will go through, lay out all the decking boards, and then once that's done, we'll come through. I'll show you the little tricks we use with the wedges to make sure the gaps are all even, but then I'll go through and screw everything off. The only issue is where I'm working right now, I don't have much room to work with, so I don't think I can really bring all the decking boards in here at one go. I'm going to have to try to work out a bit of a pattern on how to do this. Bring some boards in from the front, cut them and lay them in straight away so they stay out of the way. The two things I'm thinking about while laying in this deck is firstly, wherever I have a join, I want to make sure that the decking board next to it is at least 2 joists away from that join, and I've also got at least 2 decking boards on the same joist before I do a join on the same joist. Doing a deck like this is a pretty standard practice. That's how everyone I work with does it, and the main reason you do it is just for neatness. It starts to look pretty ugly if all your joints start to go around the same places. So one thing I will be trying to do is get a measurement. So I've got 2990 there, and I want to cut as many boards at that same measurement just to minimize time. I've also made this deck a bit tricky for myself. What I should have done is just gone through and done all my starting bay boards at the exact same measurement. I didn't have many to choose from here, and I just chose some of the longest ones. I've got 2 next to me here. They're the same size. This one and the far one's the same size, and that first one's a bit smaller. It just makes it a bit awkward now because in between every single bay board, I've got to do different patterns to work my decking boards to make those rules work. For these 2 bays anyway, since I have done the same board, it means I can do the same patterns in between both of these decking bays. If I did every single bay the same, which you probably should do when you're doing a deck, you can get 1 measurement for your first board, cut it through 4 times to every single bay, get your next board and do the same thing. It just makes it a bit easier to go through to the stage, smash out the pre-cut without having to think about where your joins are going to be, and thinking about in the future too to make sure that your boards are still going to work full lengths without having those close joins. Alright, so that's the cut and done, and I think that's probably the most accurate estimate I've ever done on materials. So we've got 3 lengths left. I'm going to be using one of these for that last board for the picture frame running through that way, and the other 2 are going to be for a face board along the side of the deck there. Alright, so we're going to jump in and start screwing off the deck. 2 things I've got with me is firstly a pack of 5mm packers. I want to do the same thing with every single board that we did with these bay boards and just put a 5mm packer in here and make sure we have that exact 5mm gap off the face board here, the perimeter board. The other thing I've gone through and done is cut about 10 of these wedges, and these are going to be super important on making sure all these boards are straight. To make it easy, we're just going to focus on one bay at a time. And what I'm going to do is just push these boards forward until we can get one of these 5mm packers in there. And then the next thing we're going to do is get these wedges and start forcing open the gaps in these boards. One thing we can probably notice is the gaps change massively from this point here to that point. That's because all these boards are twisted, they're bowed. So whenever I go through straightening the boards like this, I'm going to put the wedges in at one point here and also move over 2 joists and put the wedges a bit further down too. And that should try to get these portions of the boards quite straight. So at this point I'm just going to run my eye over everything. If there's a bigger gap here, I can loosen this wedge and hit whichever wedge has the smallest gap. I always want to make sure I put the wedges in, we get the gaps right, and then I'll go through with my chalk line, and then we'll flick the line of where I want to pre-drill them. The reason I do it this way is that when we do pre-drill all these holes, that drill bit is going to go into the joist, and it's going to make it a pilot hole for that screw to follow. If I went through and pre-drilled it first before getting it straight, that screw could veer off course into that pilot hole that I've drilled before getting the boards right, and it could try to warp the boards out of being straight. Also, you want to make sure you're using a blue chalk line. This one's a messy one, it's dropping blue chalk everywhere, but this blue chalk does rub off. If you're using black chalk or oxide, that's going to stay in your deck and you won't get rid of those lines. So I'd go through, completely screw off both of the joists where I had the packers in, and I've always skipped one in the middle. Normally that one should be straight. I'm still going to run my eye over it. Actually, this could probably do it with a little bit of love. Only if the boards are really warped, we have to go through in this in-between stage and put more wedges in. Normally if you get this joist, the next joist straight, your boards are going to be straight in between. I think I might have to do a bit of this for this deck though, with just how rough and bowed the boards were. Now, I did mention before, when straight off my deck, I normally just do one bay, and I'll do the bay all the way through to the end. It probably doesn't really matter which way you do it. Out of habit, I've always just gone through though. I started off every single bay, got the first few joists screwed down so the whole deck is started. If someone's cutting in boards too, it's easier this way because then they know that first row is good where it has to be. And if the deck's longer than what it is here and someone's cutting in front of you, they can always butt the boards up to the board laying down, knowing it's exactly where it needs to be. So I'm just gonna go through, finish screwing this off, and then I can focus on one bay and just take that down all the way to the end. You're probably also noticing how much of a nightmare this deck's been. I'm having to get the clamp out. I'm using so many wedges trying to get these boards straight. Normally it shouldn't be the instance. If you take your time, make sure you get really good decking boards. The time of the year that I'm building this though, and the last minute decision to do this meant I didn't have many options on materials. I had to buy the last stuff on the shelf, get all the warped bowed boards that were left behind. I'm still gonna make it straight, we're still gonna make it look good. It just means it's gonna take more time and be a bit more of a nightmare trying to get all these boards straight. It's always a bit slow and a bit of a struggle to start with because we do have to do those 2 rows of the wedges to try to get those boards straight. Now since we've got to start, I've got this line here which is a fixed point. This side of the board is completely straight. So now when I'm coming over here, all I have to do is 1 row of those wedges and it's just going to stiffen up those boards and it's going to make it a lot easier just to start flying through this deck now. So we're ready now to get the track saw and cut off all these boards in a straight line and get the last of the picture frame done. I've actually just recently got a new track saw. We're going to be trying out Milwaukee's track saw to do this cut. But what I want to do is go through with a chalk line, mark exactly where I want these boards to be cut off. Then we're just going to line it up with a track, go through, cut as much as we can, and finish it off with a multi-tool. So the last thing we're going to do is I've ripped down a bit of the Merbau and I'm going to be using this as a faceboard. So it's going to go on the side of the subfloor here. I've ripped it down so that it's not going to have contact with the ground. And what this is doing is just covering the side of the deck, which you probably won't see anyway, but in case you're standing back against the fence, it's just covering the side of the subfloor there. I originally was going to pack this out so that the faceboard was going to be flush with the edge of the top board, but I actually prefer the way it's looking right now. I actually like it with the top board running out past, and it's going to be a bit of a shadow. The top board's going to stick out past the faceboard, and it gives it a bit more of that floating feel, a bit more depth to the deck. Alright, so the deck's all done. Obviously, the surprise didn't work out too well, but we did get there in the end and got it finished. I've just gone through, hosed it down to clean it off. The deck still needs to be stained, but I'm not going to be doing that. My sister's going to be doing that in a week or two. You want to stay on top of it because I've done so many decks over my time and the clients haven't gone through and stained them and the decking boards just don't hold up. But anyway, there you go. That's how you build a deck over a concrete slab.